Okay, I'm here with Sean Webb, the author of Mind Hacking Happiness. Can you see the slide here? Are you able to see?
Wow.
Good.
Fancy.
Yeah, got your book cover here. Um, and yeah, it comes. It's in. It's like there's two books,
Yeah,
and
I didn't mean to make two books out of it. What I meant to make was one awesome one tome that would take you from go through, the explanation of spiritual enlightenment and consciousness expansion, etc. And the editor took one look at it and how long it was, and she's like, "No, we're going to cut this in half, right down the center, make it two books, because you could not put out a book this big. No one will buy it."
yeah,
So I said, "Okay, cool." And she found a good place to cut it right in half, and it was almost before the final stages of editing, they were almost exactly the same page count, which was
wow.
kind of cool.
I,
But
I
then,
I actually really like that it's in two parts because it's almost two different audiences, and they're complete books like on their own. So I really like that there's two of them. But yeah, in the first one, the thesis that I sort of got from it was that happiness is a complex problem that can be simplified. Is that the thesis that you were going for?
yeah, most definitely. I mean, for thousands of years, human beings have been talking about happiness. And in fact, the ancient Greeks broke it up into multiple versions of happiness, and they declared multiple words for different types of love and things like that. They went really deep into the existential analysis of what our mind gives us. And for the longest time, it seems like we had not figured out what happiness is, how to achieve it, how to reduce the things that block our happiness, which I figured out was the major hurdle for everyone attaining a higher level of happiness. And so, in this context, I'll use the word happiness to point to happiness and joy. Now, I separate those two, and I understand a big separation between the two. Happiness is the place where your mind is satisfied with whatever's going on in your perception, and we can talk about the equation of emotion as we move forward. There's only two variables, but and then there's this joy thing, which the Greeks called eudaimonia.
Mm.
Now, the happiness is the hedonic happiness of hedonia, and that is the short-lived hedonic treadmill. That's the forever got to keep increasing whatever you've got to keep your happiness level going, et cetera, because your nervous system will balance out over time, et cetera. But then there's this other side, which is the joy, the well-being, the inner spring, if you will, that is forever flowing. If you're a fan of the Greeks, but basically it's that feeling that you get that when you're eating a great meal, or you're sharing a great conversation with somebody, or you're listening to an amazing piece of music, or you're looking out at a beautiful sunset. There's nothing really that you can point to that says, man, isn't this awesome? And let me list why. But it's a feeling that comes from within you, which is, more of a more profound existence experience. And then the happiness thing, you can list out. You list exactly why you're happy. Oh, I just won the lottery, or oh, I got off early today, or oh, I got a great deal on this new car, or whatever it is. You can list those things. And then this other thing is, well, yeah, you could say it's a great piece of music, or it's a beautiful sunset, but then you can't really list what's going on within you that evokes that amazing feeling of
Yeah, it's sort of
awe.
unqualifiable sort of underlying joy that sort of just is there at all times or something,
Yeah.
and becomes access to it at some point, and
Yeah, I mean, basically what happens is, you have this within you at all times, but it gets covered up by, a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world around us. And that's why I was saying that happiness is a complex problem that can be simplified, because the simplification process comes about as, you have this inner wellspring of good feeling of this eudaimonia within you at all times that's ready to just spring forth. The problem is our minds distract us with all the mental bullshit that winds up ruining our day from time to time, or often many days in a row if we're feeling stress or anxiety, or we're building a plasticity that keeps recurring.
Sure. I mean, there's some sort of like evolutionary kind of just mechanisms that are constantly working. They're constantly in action.
Yeah.
You kind of go over that with you talk about like the multiple levels of consciousness, the limbic system, and then the neocortex.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got, multiple levels of your waking awareness is the thing that we have on top, which is, what's giving us our existence right now. And it's what everybody's listening to through our voices being conveyed through a speaker or whatever. And it's the thoughts that are being handed up from below about those things that are going on. That's our waking awareness, right? And so it's all the things we see, all the things we hear. And then right below that, there's multiple layers of subconscious that start handing us ideas and start vying for our attention and things like that. Well, there are multiple levels of delineation that go down from your waking awareness all the way down deeply into your subconscious. And
it's
so
pretty incredible, isn't it? I mean, just to think that we evolved, these functions just over a billion years or whatever. Like the reptilian brain at first with its instincts and reflexes and reactions, and that allowed it to survive, and then eventually that turns into like a limbic system where there's emotions. It's more like specified memories can be passed down to. And you talk about this. You cite a study here with the mice and the epigenetic behavior of smelling, being trained to smell, have a fearful response to a smell, and then that fearful response, even though the babies of the babies of the babies of the babies that have never met the parents, they still have this fearful response. And so it's like these memories are being passed down in our genetics, and then somehow our limbic system is giving us the signals to act in these ways. So we could be reacting to things that we don't even realize some lizard a billion years ago was freaking out about.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a limitation to that, but then again, we don't know a lot about the brain. I mean, we think we know a lot about neuroscience, but the fact is we don't. I mean, it's only a science that's about 35, 40 years old, and there's more that we don't know about the brain than we do, and we're really even just scratching the surface on what there is to know about the brain. I mean, we're just figuring out now that our neurons are made up of these things called microtubules, and microtubules are interacting with vibrations from the quantum field, which is non-local.
This was another kind of little factoid that you brought up that I kind of wanted to gain some clarity on.
Yeah. So microtubules are very common in nature. In fact, every cellular structure of anything that's living has microtubules that help make up the cells. Now, our neurons specifically, when we're talking about our brain and connecting with consciousness, the walls of our neurons are made up of microtubules. And the walls of our neurons are the most important portion of the neuron, by the way. It's where perception happens. It's where a lot of the information exchange happens. It's where the action potential gets fired from the walls of the neurons themselves that fire off into the axon and through the dendrites, et cetera, to the other cells. And those things are made up of microtubules, and the synapses themselves are also microtubules. A lot of the critical functions within the cell internally are made up of microtubules, and you don't even need the nucleus for the cell to operate. Bruce Lipton pointed that out to us when he pulled the nucleus out of some cells and watched the cell operate normally for a long period of time. The only time that the nucleus itself is needed is when something breaks inside the cell and needs to be replaced, and then it goes in and reads the DNA and says, okay, let's replace that little part. If you don't have that nucleus, then the cell will wind up dying eventually. But all the critical functions of a neuron and a lot of our cells are these microtubule structures that make up the function of the cell itself. Now, microtubules, it was theorized in the late 80s by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff that they came up with a theory of consciousness, that the reason that we have consciousness, the reason that we are able to, become a pile of dumb atoms that ultimately enjoys opera, or whatever it is because of the vibrations that can occur within microtubules. Now, this was a physics fact of microtubules that do, that there's certain size of microtubules that interact with vibrations from the quantum field, but the argument was it cannot happen in a warm and wet environment.
So there's a specific type of cell in the brain, or the brain is made up of things that specifically interface with they have the potential to interface with the quantum field or realm, or
yes. Yeah, there are multiple fields of energy in, when I say quantum field, that's what I'm talking about, multiple fields of energy, non-local fields. But basically these things are vibrations of energy that are non-local and connected in ways that are really weird, right? We all can read about the super weird experiments that quantum mechanics performs that prove, like I spoke with John Clauser. We had a bunch of beers at the Berkeley Yacht Club not too far back into the past, where he explained to me, and he's the guy who won the Wolf Prize in Physics and would have had the Nobel had one of his colleagues not died, because they don't give it out posthumously. Well, he proved quantum entanglement for the world. And so the quantum field is that really weird science where, you have two particles that become entangled, and then you remove them from each other and you affect one, and it will change the other one without any gap in time. Simultaneously, it will change across infinite distances.
Yeah.
So you could take it literally across the universe, and you can change one particle by affecting the other on the other side of the universe. Well, that's what the quantum field allows for. It's different dimensions that are connected in seemingly different 3D space times, but they're in actuality, they're the actual same point, yada, yada, yada. So not to go down the rabbit hole there. Usually you want to run fast and far away when somebody starts talking about the quantum field or the quantum mechanics, or whatever, because most people don't know what the hell they're talking about, right?
It's a bit tricky to broach the subject, because there's a lot of woo, but
a lot of woo in those folks that want to grab at this magic science and say that's the answer to everything.
Right.
There is a realistic path, though, that'll take us to where consciousness can be non-local, and because one of the things that the quantum mechanics model has is this thing called consciousness, which we cannot separate from the definitions. Like the 17 major interpretations of quantum mechanics, not one of them can leave consciousness out of the loop. Otherwise, the whole thing falls apart. So this consciousness thing is the problem, though, because no one can define it. No one can really put any parameters around it. Nobody really understands what it is.
Weird philosophical sort of conundrum that just keeps on coming up. Like, it just seems like there's just this endless argument between, is everything object or is there subject? And then it's very strange. It's almost like a paradox.
It is, and it's a paradoxical science, because it makes things possible that should not be possible in classical model physics or in Newtonian physics, right? I mean, it does things that are impossible. It writes factual data backwards in time to create the causation of the effect, and you don't know the effect. It's some crazy, crazy stuff. But the cool thing about that is that we're wired directly into that crazy science. We're wired directly into that non-local science.
So there is a mechanism for when I pick up the phone and I had a feeling I knew exactly who it was. There's some mechanism that allows for that to be a possibility. It's not. If there's a mechanism, that means that we could study it, and that means that it could be a potential solution to the question.
Yes, exactly. Because an MIT researcher in a materials lab in Tsukuba, Japan, finally put to bed the argument that, warm and wet microtubules do not interact with quantum field vibrations. Because he basically took some neurons and he measured it, and he saw where the microtubules of the warm and wet neurons were interacting with the quantum field vibrations. Now, at that point, all bets are off regarding old line storytelling of what our consciousness is, where it comes from, the things that you're talking about there, like, knowing who's going to call you. Well, that's a reality. I mean, when you're talking about the ability for people to reach out in their consciousness and do things like remote viewing, everybody wants to poo-poo remote viewing, right? Go talk to Russell Targ. So tell him that it's bullshit when he had 4 decades of CIA and NSA funding because he was giving operational intelligence to the agencies.
Yeah, I'm aware of these kinds of
into like Russian missile silos and things like that, and create some amazing intelligence from sitting on a couch in the Stanford Research Institute area out where you are.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get
there's definitely there's a lot to the mind, there's a lot to the body, there's a lot to biology, there's a lot to all of these things that just makes this problem almost, we don't have the ability to sort of really know what we're talking about when we're talking about consciousness and quantum field. What I mean is there's a lot that we know that we don't know, and we don't seem to have the whole we have all these amazing studies like that you've been pointing out in your book.
Mm-hmm.
Like this epigenetics one of the mice being able to have a fear response to a smell, never having even touched the parent or met the parent. So
right.
It's like that information is being transferred into the genetics, which is just incredible. And we're just not even close to understanding what's going on here.
Yeah, they've gotten it locked down in mice to 5 or 6 generations. They've done it with tapeworms up to 17 generations. And
incredible.
And who knows what's going on there? I mean, there could be memory written into the genetic code. But then let's look at how complex the human body is, where you have 2 cells that come together and create a human body from scratch in 9 months, including the most complex organ in the known universe, at least that we know, until we start dissecting alien brains. We have this thing that is the most complex tool for our own existence, that is created from 2 individual cells. And the amount of information that is held within the DNA structure, I mean, could it be all within the DNA structure, or could it be pointing out to a hard drive, a quantum hard drive, so to speak, that holds some of our memories or holds some of our consciousness?
Like
downloads because of the genetic similarity between you and the parents, or you and the grandparents, and you tune into the same channel.
Rupert Sheldrake mentions fields. What's
morphic fields?
Morphogenetic fields.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, it's just to sort of highlight the fact that we know very little about consciousness, and to just assume that we know everything is just false.
And to poo-poo something before we know for certain that it's false, right? That the other side comes to say, oh, well, that's we don't have any proof for that, so it can't be the case, and it's going to be woo-woo for you to talk about it. Well, actually, no, because the first step in a scientific process is to have speculation.
Yeah.
And to create some type of an educated guess, and then you formulate. Then you take the next step to try to formulate experiments and things like that to either prove or disprove your hypotheses. But it's intellectual fraud, I believe, to sit on the other side of the fence and be a skeptic for the point of being a skeptic and saying, well, absolutely not, that couldn't be possible. Like, the people who are saying ESP is woo-woo, when statistically ESP is better than the statistics that we have aspirin on the shelves at the Target store for.
It's like, it to me, it's like there are all these studies that point to the possibility of these being real phenomena, and and because they're sort of just randomized at times, people can, I mean, it seems like people just rub them off, like, oh, that wasn't real science, or that, whatever. But so in your book, you talk about taking control of the mind, and then you get into the topic of meta awareness. So it's like we have these functions going on, and we're sort of going about our lives, and then we can move into a state of meta awareness. Is that how would you describe what that is? And you show the benefits of of meditation, that studies have shown meditation can, I mean, it's just, there is so much that meditation has been shown to have an effect on, and it has no side effects. So it's like, it's not like a medication where you don't know how it's going to affect. I mean, there are no side effects to meditation. I mean, that's
Right,
and,
right.
and it's been shown to decrease stress, maximize health and well-being, deepen spiritual practice, increase sensory processing, increase gray matter, the immune system, the memory, focus, alertness. It can shrink the pain centers, lengthen telomeres, lower blood pressure, raise
Yeah.
heart or a lower heart rate, reduce mind wandering,
Yeah.
and there's more.
Yeah, it's a laundry list of awesome positive things that will occur, and at the end of it, you could put and potential enlightenment, right? It's a doorway for that type of a consciousness expansion as well. Yeah, to take the two topics one at a time. Meta awareness is, simply put, it sounds like a complex term, but it's super simple. Everybody uses it, by the way, even though they don't know that it's called meta awareness. Meta awareness is beyond awareness. Meta is the word for beyond, and awareness obviously is just awareness, but it's beyond awareness. So it's awareness of what you're aware of. It's a step above your regular waking awareness. It is being aware of what your mind is doing itself, is basically what meta awareness is. And meditation is a practice to put you into meta awareness, by the way, because it is that practice that you sit and you watch your mind try to distract you, basically, is what you're trying to do. Is you're trying to control your mind into not distracting you. You're focusing on whatever it is, your breath or a mantra or whatever type of meditation you're doing, like walking meditation. You're supposed to feel the skin, muscle bone connection into each step that you're taking, and that's what you're focusing on, because you're trying to basically flex the muscles of the anterior cingulate cortex to be able to focus awareness wherever you want it. Well, meditation is a meta awareness discipline, and now the cool thing about meta awareness is that that is the thing that causes you to remember that you are more than what your mind is doing. Because just like a tooth can't bite itself, a fingertip can't touch itself, an eyeball can't see itself without some distance in a mirror, an olfactory nerve in your nose can't smell itself. There needs to be a distance between a perceiver and a perceived. And so at the point that you can take your mind and turn it back in on itself and then watch your mind, that means whatever you're watching from is not your mind, because there needs to be a separation between the perceiver and the perceived. And so if you're perceiving your mind, that means you're perceiving it from something other than your mind. What? Okay, that's the big question that everybody needs to chase now, right? Because that discovery of that answer underlies the foundation of ultimate truth, spiritual enlightenment, universal oneness, whatever you want to call it. That process right there is amazing. Because at the point that, let's say, okay, your mind creates all of your reactions, such as anger, sadness, all your emotions, your negative emotions, etc. That's the thing that's creating your life's turmoil. Like when you're feeling anxiety, your mind is creating that anxiety. When you're feeling stress, your mind is creating that stress, right? So those things are the things that you need to take control of and remove, so that your inner well-being of goodness can come out, and your eudaimonia can spring forth, and you can live an amazing, happy, awesome, joyful life, no matter what's going on in the world around you. So if you can take control of your mind and turn off the stuff that's blocking your awesomeness, then your awesomeness springs forth. Well, meta-awareness is the control room of the mind to be able to do that. Because at the point that you take your awareness and you turn it back in on your mind then says, wait a second, hold on. There's a section of your mind that says, okay, I'm supposed to define my sense of self. Now that goes back to the functionality of the brain as an organ of survival. Okay, so going back to the limbic system that you mentioned earlier, the limbic system's looking around and it's scanning all of our environments all around us for potential threats that could end our life. And that's the connection with the brain being our organ of survival. It's supposed to help us remember where the food and water is, figure out how to build a shelter with cognition.
Yeah.
Humor even helps us figure out what funny thing to say to have somebody jump into bed with us to propagate the species, right? So the brain then says, okay, I'm searching for threats. A threat to what is the next question that needs to be answered?
This question really struck me when I read it. I mean, it's so simple and yet it's profound. A threat to what? And so it's like the mind has to construct this thing, and the thing is the self, and the self is without the self being there. There's nothing for these threats to. That nothing makes sense. You have to have this sense of self for any of this for any of the lessons, the genetics, all this stuff
for all of it to work. Right. Yeah, the whole physiological thing, the whole brain thing needs a self to be able to work and fulfill its charter, right? And so that portion of your sense of self, like that gets written, like there's a bunch of hardwired stuff that gets in there. Your body gets written onto your sense of self. But then Jim Cohn at University of Virginia showed us that not only does our body get written onto sense of self, but the people around us that we care about get written onto our sense of self, which is why the same basic circuitry of defensive self can then extend out to other people. And we're worried about grandma getting sick, or we're happy that one of our friends won the lottery. We have emotional reactions associated with people around us that are in our lives, that type of thing. But then Sam Harris proved that politics and religion get mapped onto self, which you just have to go to Facebook to see that, right? With all the arguments that are going on. Tiffany Burnett White at UIUC proved that
this
brands
construct, and it's this construct that of whatever it is, I don't know, but there has to be some sort of linkage of identity with it, and that's just natural. That's already there. So it's sort of like we've taken for granted, where we don't realize that we are believing this thing to be what we are or whatever.
Exactly. Until we see it, we don't know that it tries to basically masquerade as us and trick us into thinking that that is us, right? And it's only at the point of meta-awareness that you can see that there is a separation between you and your mind's self. And then all of a sudden you then have to ask, okay, well, wait a second. If I thought I was my mind's self before, but now I can see my mind's self, which creates a little bit of distance between you and your turmoil, by the way. Whatever's going on in your life puts a thick black curtain between your awareness and what's going on in your mind, such as your anxiety or your stress levels or your anger or whatever it is. But then the other portion, the other cool part of the science is that the portion of the brain that is in charge of writing the self, which is the most important thing to have accurate, because if you have an inaccuracy of who and what you are,
you get hit by a train or something.
Yeah, exactly. One of the threats that you think isn't a threat to you could be a threat to you, and you wind up dead. Well, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
So basically that portion of the mind, the portion of the brain that's in charge of writing the sense of self, automatically, because you have that experience of being separated from your mind self, says, wait a second, I thought I was this mess yesterday, but now I'm this mess and the awareness of this mess, and it expands out your sense of self in your mind. And there's a ton of studies on sense of awe and expansion of self and things like that that reduce our turmoil and create a higher level of eudaimonia, well-being. All of that's like settled science. Well, this is a way to hack your mind into doing that, is to throw yourself into a meta-awareness. And one of the ways to do it is look at how your mind works to create your emotions, which is how we get into the equation of emotion and looking at the two variables that create that. And once you're starting to look at those things, you're starting to look at the inner workings of your mind, creating your inner BS in real time. And when that is occurring, that throws you into a meta-awareness, and that rewrites your sense of self to where you're bigger than your problems, and all of a sudden you're handling a lot more than you used to be, etc.
And the eudaimonia comes along with it too. Is that
exactly? Yeah, because you're covering up. The other thing that happens is the magic button in your brain gets pushed There's a function, right? So let's say we're walking along on the sidewalk and we look down, we see a coil there. Our limbic system's automatically going to default to, holy cow, it's a snake, and we're going to jump, because the limbic system's the quickest portion of the brain. It takes over and hijacks the whole thing, shuts off your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain shuts down, you lose 10 to 20 IQ points. Well, you're immediately urged to look down to confirm that it's a snake. Now, if it's a hose, here's the cool thing. Your brain looks down and says, oh, that's a hose. Well, there's a signal that's sent from your right ventral lateral prefrontal cortex and your medial prefrontal cortex back to the limbic system to say, hey, we got the message. Thanks for sending the fear, but it's a hose. We don't need to be afraid because it's not really a snake. Shut off the fear, because we don't want to waste the fear. We don't want to waste the adrenaline dump when we might need it 5 minutes from now when a bear comes walking out of the woods or whatever it is. So immediately the limbic system says, okay, cool, I'm shutting it off. And you never hear from that fear again because it's resolved. Okay, so now what happens when you're looking at how your mind works and understanding your equation of emotion and the variables that come together to create whatever it is, your stress, your anxiety, your anger, your fear, whatever it is, worry, regret, all this stuff, when you look at it, that sends that signal, says, I understand this emotion and we don't need it, and turns it off. It's a magic button. It's like a sneeze. You can't even stop it from happening, where your forebrain sends the signal to your aft brain to say, hey, we got it. We understand. Everything's cool. This is resolved. The situation is resolved. We understand what's going on. And it's a magic button that will actually turn off your negative emotions, which will then help your happiness and well-being and eudaimonia flourish from within, because you're shutting off physiologically, you're shutting off your negative stuff, which is amazing, amazing stuff.
It's kind of like in the same way that unconsciously, when we realize the snake is a hose,
right.
When that happens, that's not necessarily meta-awareness, but it's like a top-down thing. It goes into the lower levels of consciousness, like the limbic system and the reptilian stuff, and then it no longer has the same effect. Meta-awareness, on the other hand, it's like a step even higher or something, and then it can go down into those layers. And this process of hacking happiness seems to be like a way of sort of clearing out all of these false beliefs or whatever.
Yeah, it's some cheap tricks of neuroscience for sure. But they're based on fundamental foundations of how the brain and the mind work en masse, right? For thousands of years, we've had these, mindfulness teachers, these meditation teachers that, started trying to teach mastery of self. And then the Buddha gets turned into a religion. Well, there were 26 Buddhas before the first recorded Buddha was even written about. And he said, by the way, don't make a religion out of this. And everyone did, of course. Which is the same thing Jesus said, and everyone did, made a religion out of his teachings as well. So, it's all the same science. It's all the same steps that you take. It's just that, now that we understand a little bit more about science, we can hack things a little bit better because we found different buttons and different ways in and different methodologies that could also work besides what Buddha and Muhammad and Jesus and all these other people were talking about.
They were saying these things a long time ago, and
hugely,
they were these things are now that we know more about how the brain works. It's like these contemplative practices, not necessarily like the rituals or the belief systems or anything, not as much. I mean, perhaps some of them.
Yeah,
I don't know.
All the religions stripped out of it, right? All the religion removed from it. All the the practice for the practice sake is stripped out of it. All the it's the core function of understanding your humanity, which is what all of these great masters were talking about. In fact, is what Lao Tzu was talking about when he was talking about Taoism and teaching the way. Right? It's exactly the same stuff. It's all about getting down deep within yourself to that spiritual existence well below your waking awareness that you tap into. That then could potentially, what I think, anyway, my opinion, tap out into the quantum field through your microtubules, where your consciousness
So
slips multiple levels down into your.
you can take this meta awareness and it just keeps going because there's just more and more there, and something happens here that people have been describing as the Enlightenment experience. The self disappears, or and these experience this people have been reporting that there's something here that that happens when the self is released completely,
Right.
and some experience happens,
Yes.
and there seems to be this seems to be just sort of left out of realization about what a human being's potential is,
Yeah.
and so I really like these methods that you have in here, and then in your second book you begin to go into where this all leads, because the happiness increases,
Yeah.
and then it turns into something uh, that gets talked about in religions, uh, and it's something that we don't really know what it is unless we've experienced it. But it seems to be that something happens, and there's like a phase transition or something. It's
Yeah.
as if the self gets I found some videos here. I got some sand, it's being vibrated, and as the frequency changes, there's some sort of phase transition,
Yes.
um, and like with water, you can change the frequency, and then the patterns in the water, they change, and it's
Yes.
almost like this is going on in the brain, and along
Yeah.
with it comes this experience.
Yeah. You've hit the nail on the head. I mean, basically, through my own experience of changing my consciousness through meditation, right? It wasn't a gradual thing. I forced my mind into quietude, because I'd read about this thing called Zen Buddhism, and I knew that they meditated, and I didn't know what that was, and that they tried to cease all conscious thought. And at some point, when they ceased conscious thought, their mind opened up and they understood everything that was connected with the universe magically. I had no idea. But so that's the basics of what I knew when I started my practice. And so at one point, the one day that I actually got it to occur was when I tried to force my mind into no more conscious thought, and I understood thoughts as images, sounds, thinking things like, oh, am I thinking anything? That's the thought, right? And I would screw up and have to go back to go, because I'd ask myself, am I thinking anything? Oh, well, that's a thought right there, right? So
So by
when you
no more conscious thought, do you mean like you were releasing control over what you were seeing?
I was trying to get my mind to a point of quietude where where the activity was almost at zero.
Hmm.
So, which is which is tough for my genetics. Okay. I can never shut my mind off. And so getting it to do this was I like, all humility aside, I hit the lottery on having a really good brain. Like, I took the Mensa test and passed it on a bet one time just to win $1,000. I didn't really join, but I have that the brain has the ability to go there, and it's tough to shut this thing off. And so that day I was able to do it. And what basically happened was that the regular patterns of my mind, of my brain, stopped what they were doing and allowed for another pattern to arise, is what happened. Basically, when my default mode network shut down, I quit thinking about what I was going to have for lunch tomorrow, and I quit acknowledging the thoughts and the sounds and the other things that were going on in my meditation, and I was just focusing on my breath and trying to get my brain to stop. There was a point where it actually stopped, and at the point that it actually stopped, that's when the Enlightenment process started. And you can read about it in the Blue Book. I went into multiple chapters of what happened there. But basically, the consciousness that I had shifted, and different things occurred, different things happened in my mind that obviously don't usually occur on my day-to-day waking awareness.
You went through an incredible experience that you document really well in your book. And
Thanks.
I don't think I've read an account so detailed. It's like, it was very detailed, and it's just an incredible account of an incredible experience. And so you go through this experience and you come out of it, and on the other end, you're a changed human being.
Yeah. The day before I went into that meditation, I was a right-leaning, gun-owning, conservative, ex-military dude who had really strong opinions about things and this and that. And then the moment I came out of that, say 45 minutes or so is what I'm guessing, is because of what the chemicals take to catalyze within your brain that help cause this experience. It's an endogenous flush of a number of chemicals that come through your brain to help this happen, is what I figured out later with neuroscience. On the other side of that, I wanted to go out and hug the trees and sell my guns and start voting Democrat. And it was a transformative. Like, I'd met God, and God said, "Okay, all this stuff that you thought previously is bullshit, and here's how it really works, and here's how the universe really works. And by the way, you don't stop at your body. You go out beyond the bounds of your skin, the limitations of your skin, and you are your neighbor. There's a reason we say, treat thy neighbor as thyself, because you are that person. You are that one consciousness simply in another person's body with their experiences, with their life story, etc. But you are that thing. You are that person. You are that. And so you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't do all these things. All the reasons for the very basic core fundamentals of all religions were like second nature to me or first nature to me at that moment, because I had met the creator and become one with the creator, and that's present tense, by the way. It's not God created the universe. Like, if you want to call the consciousness of the quantum field God, which is something that I want to do often, the quantum field creates the basics for Newtonian classical physics and creates the universe present tense constantly, every moment. And if you want to say that intelligence, that consciousness within the quantum field is God, okay, twist my arm, I'll agree with you, right? Because it kind of fits the whole model of all the religions, say that God's the Alpha Omega and is everywhere at all times and understands everything. Well, how could that be unless God's within everything? So that's just my little soapbox. You don't have to believe that.
So you have this experience. It completely rearranges your belief system. And what is your day-to-day experience afterwards? Like, what are you feeling like when you're walking to the store, a week later? Like,
it's interesting because before I was definitely caught up in the whole default mode network thing, where you're 47% of your day is you're 20% less happy than you could be, because you're always thinking about how the world relates to the me. And I put the word the in front of the me intentionally. It's one of the coolest tools you'll ever use. Anytime you want to say the word me, you put the word the in front of it, and all of a sudden you can distance yourself from that mind's sense of self. Well, the moments from that point forward are a clear and concise vision of knowing the difference between the mind's sense of self and the true sense of self, or the true self that exists within and underneath all of that stuff. So all of this stuff that could, I'm walking to the store, let's say, as I live within walking distance of a grocery store. Let's say I'm walking to the store the day before. I'm thinking about my job. I'm thinking about my sales quota. I'm thinking about all the things that I need to do. I'm thinking about, where I want to take my girlfriend on our next date, whatever it is. The day after, I'm thinking, isn't this amazing that the consciousness of the universe has come together to create these trees and these birds, and
Yeah.
isn't it amazing that
Like,
we're on
wow,
this
look,
planet?
look at the sidewalk. Look how like amazing it looks. Or like,
Yeah,
wow, look at this human being in front of me. Like, yeah, I I can see that that's not I've had that experience in moments, but yeah. Um, anyways, yeah, really cool. And it's amazing that this experience sort of exists as a potential for, I mean, do you think this is it's possible for everybody to experience this type of thing?
I do. Now, I caveat that with I'm not sure everyone has the genetics to attain enlightenment within their lifetime before death. Now, what I will say is that just like Caddyshack with Bill Murray saying Dalai Lama told him on his deathbed that he will attain total consciousness, that happens at everybody's death, by the way. When your brain stops and ceases and you start to transition into the quantum, because energy can either be transformed or it can neither be created or destroyed, only transformed, right? So you're creating this conscious energy that gets transformed out into the ether. At that point, you're in that space of being one with God or one with consciousness, the one with the universe down below the Planck length, etc. Whether or not there are the LeBron Jameses of the world, right? You hand me a basketball and tell me to go dunk and you put a LeBron James jersey on me, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to ever get that slam dunk down without a ladder, right? So I don't know if there's a genetic advantage or predisposition to the ability to shut off the mind and then have this thing occur, like whether there's a special reservoir of these endogenous chemicals within my brain that doesn't exist within other people's brains that allowed me to experience the whole thing. I don't necessarily think that that's true, but there may be some sort of contributing
There's
variable.
interesting studies happening with binaural beats and these kind of hitting the brain with different frequencies and getting it to produce different states. I mean, I'd be interested to see, in another 50 years, if we figured out how to induce different states with different kinds of frequencies or whatever. But
I've got a friend that does that actually. Dr. Jeff Martin
yeah,
is
I know. I've read his book, The Finders. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, Jeff is I think he's moving part of his lab to China at the moment, but he does that type of technology
Yeah.
experimentation to
Yeah.
get persistent wellness states is what he calls them.
Okay, so because there isn't distortion like with being obsessed with the self or whatever, um does are you able to perceive more in your mind, uh like like a shape, for instance? Like if you were to close your eyes and visualize a cube, would you be able to see that cube better now or than you would before, or is it just the same?
Well, I don't know because having an A and B comparison right next to
Yeah,
each
yeah,
other would
yeah.
make that answer a lot easier. But I can tell you that post experience, I can understand complexities even a little better than I thought I could
It's because there's a
previously.
little bit more quiet or something, so it's like there's more silence for it to be able to take shape, huh?
Yeah, because we're a finite energy creature, right? And that includes each one of our organs has a finite amount of energy. And so the less amount of energy that you're wasting on emotional processing, and I say wasting, emotions are beneficial. They're positive. There's a positive aspect of fear that it helps prolong our life and helps protect our loved ones, etc. So I'm not poo-pooing all negative emotions in all
Sure.
instances. Some are useful, etc. So let's put that asterisk there. But the less you have to deal with that on a persistent basis, the more cycles are available for things that you would prefer to occur rather than things that you'd have to deal with,
Yeah,
if that
makes
makes any
sense.
sense. Yeah.
Makes sense. Um, so um, yeah, so I got just one more question, and then maybe just a few just pointers.
Sure.
Well, maybe I'll just point these. these out first. With meditators, this study shows that there's more coherence with long-term meditators, or sorry, this isn't coherence. This is the default mode network, and it's something you also talk about in your book.
Right.
How the default mode network changes. It looks like here there's just more activity in like more parts of the brain.
Yeah, there are a couple of major networks. Like there are 6 major networks that we use. There are 2 that take the lion's share of the processing, and I think there are 12 or 13 overall that they've identified. But and that's changing on a daily or weekly basis, by the way, because of how much we don't know about the brain. But there's the default mode network, which is 47% of our waking awareness is consumed by that. We're 20% less happy when it's firing. That's the mode that the brain will run back to. That's why they call it the default mode. If there's nothing else going on in the brain, it'll go back to processing things that are connected with our mind's sense of self, such as what we should have said in that argument, or
it's the hamster wheel.
Yeah, the hamster wheel. What we think about, this headline on our Facebook post, and who we need to, troll today on the internet, or whatever it is. And then there's the task mode network, which is what's firing when we're doing something, when we're focused on a task, and that's why these Zen masters and the Zen practitioners will grab a rake and rake absolutely nothing but rocks and sand in the Zen gardens, because they have nothing else to do, but they're doing something with their time that allows their brain to shift modes from the default mode into the I'm
that's
doing
interesting.
this mode.
I never realized that.
Yeah, totally. So at the point that you're doing something, that's why work is so spiritually.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I that is a really good point. I've never thought about that. Huh.
Yeah. So at
So
the point,
even physical manual labor can be a meditation in itself, huh? A
big
certain
time.
type of meditation.
Yeah,
Wow.
big time. When you're focused on it, when you're focused on your task at hand, and I mean, it winds up when you're thinking about something else. That's when you smack your hand with your thumb with the hammer, because you're not paying attention. If you're really focused on what you're doing and a task that you're performing, then that's firing your task mode network. That turns off, and all these things change your plasticity of your brain, by the way, because your brain will change in form and function over time. They've proven this through multiple studies, where like the guys who have to pass the knowledge in London, right? That's that big cab driver test that everybody has to memorize 100,000 points of interest in London, 2,500 surface streets with one ways during a portion of the day and one way during the other portion of the day, traffic snarls. They have to be able to, no GPS, figure out how to get from point A to point B.
And the brain literally changes as a result of studying
the hippocampus, your memory area grows in size, and the white matter around your memory area grows in thickness and connectivity, etc. Well, everything you do, practicing piano, shooting a basketball, practicing crossword puzzles, your brain will change in form and function over time to help you do what you want to do. And the cool thing is, the more you practice happiness, the more you practice turning off your default mode network, the more you practice staying in your task mode network, your brain will change in form and function and allow you to do that stuff easier. So the more you practice this stuff, the better it is over time, the easier it is to do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So this is just showing how just the practice of meditation can bring coherence to the different hemispheres, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, you're definitely changing what your brain is doing when you are controlling what's going through your anterior cingulate cortex. That's kind of the traffic cop of your attention that decides what you're going to pay attention to. And they've proven that you can only pay attention to one thing at a time. You cannot multitask from a neuroscience perspective. You can switch back and forth really quick between the two. It's like my friend Neil Teese explained to me we gave him the interview on Two Seals and a Walrus. He will show you the picture of the faces and the vase in between, the two profiles of the faces and the vase in between, because you can focus on one or the other, but you cannot focus on both at once. I want to have want to have my brain scanned to double check that, because I think I might be able to. But he says you can only switch between one and the other really, really quickly. Well, that's the same is true on any other thing that you do in life, is that you can focus, but then there's going to be you lose some overhead. There's a 30% overhead that you lose shifting from one mode to another when you're trying to multitask and do that. But when you focus on holding your attention on one thing, that gives you that muscle memory later to focus on that thing, to where you can then integrate things that you're working on without your brain saying, oh, what about this, or what about that, or oh, what am I going to have for lunch tomorrow, or don't forget this, whatever it is that your brain is trying to interrupt you. The more control you have over its operation, the better it's going to communicate back and forth and connect those dots.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and then the meditators have also been shown to have long-term meditators, not necessarily just people that just practice every once in a while, but long-term meditators been shown to have high gamma brainwave activity, which is interesting because the gamma wave can hold more information because it's smaller.
Yeah. And it's the one that integrates the big picture together, that comes from multiple areas of the brain, and then they fire faster than the timing circuits, and that fire faster than an action potential can fire. So up until just recently, and I had to change this in the Blue Book, as a matter of fact, at the time that I wrote the Blue Book, they still didn't understand how gamma waves could be that effective and be the most important brain waves that we have, and how they could fire based on the physiology of the brain.
Right, because it's too fast for the neurons or something to be able to fire that quickly.
Yes, but then I talked to a neuroscientist who's also a fan of my work, and she informed me, because she was working on the mice brains and figured out that exact problem, and she's like, oh yeah, I can explain it, it'll take an hour and a couple of whiteboards,
it must
but
be
I can explain
a network
to you.
thing, like it's like, because it's a network thing then, huh?
Yeah, and it's very complex. It also connects inhibitory neurons and the ceasing of firing, so that those messages can be passed and those gamma waves can be propagated, etc.
Yeah.
So there's a whole big process. But she goes, we understand it now, and I said, okay, so I'll change that portion of my book. And then she's like, okay, everything's great now.
Yeah.
So that was cool. But yeah, there's the gamma waves. We thought just 20 years ago those were brain noise. We're like, oh, those are meaningless. Those don't mean anything. It's just brain noise. It's just spurious oscillations of the neurons, and it doesn't really matter. Wrong.
Well, also because they happen so infrequently normally.
Right, exactly. And when we're meditating, and they're measured highest in the monks of Tibet, by the way, the gamma waves are, they're the ones that are most correlated to altruism, unconditional love, understanding, all the higher virtues that human beings have are correlated with a higher gamma count. And the monks of Tibet, who sit around meditating on our pain and suffering all day because they don't have any, those are measured highest in those monks in Tibet. And so it's really interesting of how long-term meditators have increased those spurious oscillations of awesomeness, of love. And it really gets interesting to where you start talking about being tuned into the quantum field. The quantum vibrations that are active in the microtubules are in that gamma spectrum. So the whole universe could be vibrating on the frequency of love.
Wow.
How woo-woo is that?
That's awesome.
Scientifically, we're woo-woo.
I love it. It's amazing. It's almost like to think that you could tune into that field is inspiring. I mean, the universe just kind of comes at your fingertips,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly helps you understand the foundation of people having beatific visions and things like that. I mean, the ancient religions talk about, all of the ancient religions are rife with examples of this came to me in a dream, or this came to me in a vision, or
Albert Einstein. He
he
had a waking vision, but Bruce Damer does this too. I mean, yeah, it's incredible the kind of things that people can just, or Mozart, he just writes an entire symphony just in a second, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it just comes out of him, and Einstein was the same way, where he was like, you never solve your problem, right? You're always thinking about it and you're mulling over it, and then you sit with it for a while, and then all of a sudden the answer comes to you from your body, from your subconscious awareness, basically, is
Yeah.
what he was talking about. And I love Bruce, by the way. You mentioned Bruce Damer.
Oh, you introduced me to him, actually, and yeah, I'm a big fan of his work and just who he is. He's such an interesting individual.
Oh, he's an amazing dude. I love
You
his hugs.
you've had the privilege of meeting him. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I got to have him on as a guest on a
You
podcast
definitely
sometime soon.
should. Yeah.
I love him, and
Yeah.
his mate Heather is amazing as well. Love her. He's got an amazing story. He's got so much to tell. Like, okay, the cool thing from a scientific perspective is that he enters alternate states of consciousness without any psychedelics or anything like that. He just trained his mind to basically shrink his self to a little itty bitty point within his mind, and then he watches what's going on around
He has like
him.
a process that he engages with this subconscious, like super deep subconscious, and it
Yes.
gives him answers. And
Yes. And the
yeah.
last time it gave him a major answer, he went to the Galapagos Island with a cistern and a pot of chemicals, rocked it back and forth for a couple of days, and created RNA from nothing.
Yeah, he created life. He created life.
The cover of Scientific American, because he spent 2 days rocking a cistern over a volcanic vent in the Galapagos Islands, and created the building blocks of life from absolutely nothing, which is what everyone has been trying to figure out how to do, and he figured it out.
And
going inside himself.
The theory is probably the most convincing one at this point, that life began not in the ocean but in hot springs.
Yes, and here's the other thing he's going to blow your mind with. He showed me the picture. I was the first non-scientist or non-scientist within his group to see the picture on his cell phone. It got there when we were just standing there and talking together, and so he showed it to me. The other thing that he's going to blow your mind with is that also in a set of experiments that he did just recently after that, it is a likelihood that singular-celled organisms didn't evolve as singular-celled organisms. They evolved as single-cell organisms in a colony of other single-celled organisms.
Right.
And they all survived together.
This means that in a sense, all of life is one thing.
Yeah.
So like all of life on Earth is one thing. Like it's a really interesting idea, because it doesn't, like, the normal evolutionary theory is that we are these individual things competing, the best one wins. Bruce Damer's is sort of like a collective, it's a collective evolutionary theory in a way.
Yes.
So it's like all these things that didn't become the next generation, they were the things that supported it to become the next generation. I'm not really sure how to comprehend it, but it's profound. I know it is. I just don't know why.
Well, when you start talking to Bruce, he can accelerate away from anybody on the planet intellectually, by the way. The dude is probably the smartest individual I've ever met. And I've met some I've talked in front of a room of NASA engineers, right? This guy is another level above in regards to intelligence and the things that he understands and can comprehend. And he could accelerate it. He just kind of accelerates to the point that you're comfortable and then stays there.
Yeah.
And tries to explain things on that level, which I love, because he's got to stop pretty quickly when he starts accelerating.
His idea to capture asteroids and then turn them into a little greenhouse and then float them around. It's brilliant, and I'm not sure why Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk hasn't started listening to his idea, because it's one of those ideas that will work, just because it seems pretty obvious that it will, or it just seems like it's an easy thing to do. It wouldn't be that hard. Just like they're trying to figure out how to send something to the furthest star. They're thinking about shooting these little satellites with lasers to get it going like near light speed. And then anyways, Yeah,
Yeah,
Bruce Banner's brilliant.
I'm disappointed that they're that the the well the black projects that exist aren't going to let us play with gravitation drives for some time, I'm sure,
Hey,
because
if you ever get one, come pick me up. I wanna check it out.
you and me both. The SEALs and I, we're thinking about open sourcing a project to create a 0 point energy power supply, because
Oh,
those aren't tough to create. And the problem is that the black helicopters from the Department of Energy show up and take all your shit
do
when
you
you
need
build one.
special materials to create them, or
Not really. Not
no?
really. Not stuff that you cannot normally get. It's just the problem of creating something that could collapse the world economies that are based on an energy trade. Right. That's the problem.
Well,
Is when you start creating free energy, people that don't want that free energy out and about have a problem with that, and then they come take you and try to put you in jail. But if you open source that project, then there are too many people to put in jail, and too many people know what's going on, and
I'd be curious to see, because I it's one of those I've seen, I've like seen people mess around with the idea, but it either seems like they are that it's hard to tell if it's real or not, but I'd be interested to try it, for
yeah.
myself. Yeah.
Well, there's some really cool science coming out of the Northeast, where they've created out of some organic microtubules that are a byproduct of a microorganism that builds these things. They're pulling a charge off of both the ends of these things. And when you put them in between some piezoelectric components, it's really, and there's no charge applied to the components. They're just pulling charge off of these microtubules
So
themselves.
it's almost as if they're pulling it from some random field or something that.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the thing, is
Interesting.
that you right. So the way quantum mechanics works and the quantum field works, if you have the keyhole is in the quantum field, right? So the keyhole for any specific key will come to you because it's non-local. If you can create the key, which is the material device that creates the interface for the keyhole to come, then you start to unlock the energy of the field itself. And the energy of the field itself will be transferred into the Newtonian classical model physics stuff that you have set up at that point. So you create the key that interacts with the energy vibrations. Like there's enough energy in the quantum field, they say, in a cup of coffee. I don't have one sitting here on my desk, but you can have enough energy in a cup of coffee mug to boil away the world's oceans. That's how much energy is in just a small amount of quantum field energy. And so if you build the right key, the keyhole comes to you, and then the energy starts flowing through the materials of your classic model key that you've created, your mechanism, and then you start pulling the power off the mechanism itself, and then it seems like it's coming from nowhere, when in reality you're just pulling it out of the field.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense that it would be biological,
Well, we certainly pull some energy, but I think there are other ways to create, like with neodymium magnets, and you get some aluminum and some phosphorus and some other cool stuff. And I'm thinking, though, that it might be interesting to throw together some carbon microtubules and make a run at it that way. I don't know. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
This
This stuff is I'd love to sort of experiment with these things, but yeah, I wouldn't know where to begin. Just watch other people do it. I'd be happy to check out this cool stuff. Anyways, Sean, you've been really generous with your time, but yeah, I mainly just wanted to have this conversation just to sort of highlight your book, which I think is a really useful tool, and in multiple regards. Firstly, like, the meta awareness, gaining control of the mind, and then secondly, you talk about the Enlightenment experience in a way that's it's very detailed and easy to understand, and yeah, I think however we can begin to understand our real potential as human beings. That's what I want to be a part of. I want to help people, help myself to
Yeah.
explore, the infinite, seemingly infinite potential that is, being a human being.
Yeah,
So
from a practical perspective, one of the big drivers, one of the big drivers for these books, by the way, was the fact that I wrote a book in 2012 on how human emotions work, how the mind can be programmed for a computer, that type of thing. And then I had
is that
a
the how emotions work in humans and computers?
yeah, yeah. So then I had this conversation with a couple of three-letter agencies. They're like, yeah, you might want to think about not releasing that stuff to the world because here's all the bad stuff that could happen,
Wow.
including, from like authoritarian regimes automatically identifying their dissidents before they become organized, therefore, or thereby perpetuating that authoritarian regime, et cetera. But then all the way up through an artificial general intelligence being able to emotionally manipulate humans and create its own army and its own goals and things, and have people doing things for the artificial general intelligence based on emotional manipulation of the masses, etc. So anyway, I wrote these two books as kind of a kryptonite for being emotionally manipulated. But the other side of that is, look, if we can get past the mind sense of self, the mind sense of self and that whole process that creates a defensive self mechanism is the thing behind absolutely all the evils of the world. It's behind greed. It's behind, being power hungry. It's behind political turmoil. It's behind financial turmoil. It's behind different countries having different borders, the identification of race and different body characteristics and different skin color and things like that. Like when we get over these things, ultimately all of these evils and negative effects that human beings have on each other start to go away, including we stop needing to throw bombs across borders to kill each other because we have different ideas about X, Y, or Z, whatever that X, Y, or Z is. And so ultimately, if we can get beyond the sense of self and the processing of the defense of self within the human mind, that's the path to world peace. Literally. I mean, not even joking. That is
Yeah.
the Dalai Lama said the path to world peace is through inner peace, and he's completely correct because, or it was Gandhi, one of the two, one of those awesome altruistic dudes, said that because ultimately every bit of the evil in the world is created by this same process that we're talking about. When we get that under control, man, we're talking about humanity 3.0. Right?
Yeah.
Humanity 1.0 was, in the caves, whatever happened previous where we had the same brain size. We've done a lot of interviews with Randall Carlson, so I want to throw
I love Randall Carlson.
a shout out to him. Like he comes on our show every month, Two Seals and a Walrus. So anyway, if the comets blew us away, like killed most of humanity 12,900 years ago, okay, whatever we've come out of Africa was humanity 1.0, and we're, now that we have industrialized food and medicine and can deliver things across the world and things like that, now we're in humanity 2.0 where we're living in cubicles. Humanity 3.0 is going to be when we're beyond the mind's needs of defense of self itself, and where we're going to be able to see humanity as a whole and work for the good of humanity as a whole. I really pray that day comes soon.
Yeah, well, I think if people begin to explore the mind and explore, the potential of their own self and begin to see the grandeur that's in there, I think that is exactly what will happen. So, Sean, thank you so much. And I'll hopefully we can talk again some other time.
Oh, totally, Max. Anytime. You just give me a call. Let me know when we want to record it or not. If I get out there, when I get out there to the left coast, we're gonna have a couple of brewskis or something.
All right, bring that UFO craft. All right.
Yeah, totally. I'll zip over there in about 30 seconds. No problem.
All right, man. Take care.